Hey, what's up? This is Nick with Ultimate Motorcycling, and today I just got done riding the brand new 2022 Triumph Speed Triple 1200 RR. Now, you guys know that this bike is derived from the famed Speed Triple 1200 naked bike, and we just reviewed the RS model not too long ago at Chuckwalla Raceway. It's a motorcycle that I enjoyed quite a bit. Now, the core changes between the RS naked bike and the RR are pretty easy, but they do some fundamental changes to the riding position and the overall experience of the motorcycle. Of course, you have this happy little fairing up here, so the bikini fairing with the single headlight. And the biggest mechanical change that we have going for us is Öhlins semi-active suspension. That means you are having adaptive damping as you ride down the road or the racetrack. It's something that's really helpful in a street capacity. Now, the other fundamental change is an update to the riding position. Of course, we have these clip-on handlebars right here, and they are pushed forward, they are pushed lower, and the foot pegs themselves are also raised up a little bit and kicked back a little bit. So what that does is it really just cants you in a more aggressive riding position. Now, that's the summary of the bike. So I'm gonna get into the nitty-gritty, and I want you guys to stick around. The first thing I want to talk about is, of course, this 1160cc triple cylinder engine. Now, Triumph has really made their bones on the triple cylinder engine for a number of reasons. It's just a very beautifully sorted, very just stunningly smooth engine that creates, according to Triumph, 177 horsepower and 92 foot-pounds of torque. Now, those are pretty big numbers, and in the naked bike game or, the sport bike game, that's nothing to sneeze at. The important thing about this engine, and I think the critical aspect that they've really achieved here, is that it's incredibly smooth and tractable off the bottom. So even though those are big, powerful numbers to deal with, it's an engine that is manageable. So I think if you have some skill under your belt, you're an intermediate rider, experienced rider, you're gonna have a lot of fun on this thing. And this engine just bleeds personality. It's just an incredible piece of kit right here. So you get that good low end, good mid-range, and then you have all that rev-happy top-end power that the triple cylinder engine is known for. Now around the racetrack, that's something that you could really dig into and really exploit, at high speeds and high performance setting. But on the street, where people are really gonna be riding this thing predominantly, you have that low ends and mid-range to really just take you through the corners and, power you along. And it does so beautifully. Related to that, you have different ride modes, of course, as with any modern Triumph. And the thing that they've really done across the board, whether you're talking about the urban riding modes, rain, sport, road, and the track modes, sport and track are actually the same, is that the fueling is just immaculate. The way it delivers power, nice and smooth, very supple, it's excellent in that regard. And that's something that I think a lot of people are gonna appreciate about this motorcycle.
The list of complaints for this motorcycle are pretty slim, although when riding in sport mode, there is a faint hint of snatchiness during the initial on and off stages when riding at mid-level RPMs.
Now, going into what really defines the RR from the RS and is the riding position. Of course, it is a more sporty riding position. It's not quite as aggressive as a true super sport or super bike. It's probably about 60, 70% of the way there. So it's cafe racer-esque if you want to throw that label on it. I think that would be fair, but it's not fully committed. And what that does is actually puts a lot more weight over the front end, makes the bike a little bit more pointed than the naked machine, because again, you're up a little bit on the naked bike and you're kind of sat back, and you could just get more front end feel from a chassis that I pretty much fell in love with while riding the RS. Of course, the downside to that more committed riding position, as with any committed riding position, is that it becomes a little bit risky when you're riding at slow speed. So Triumph wanted to make, a sport bike for the road. So give you that super sport sensibility, that performance, that energy and experience, and they did that. It's not as aggressive as a super sport or super bike, like I said. So that's the one downside in that capacity. Now, the other big change is the introduction of semi-automatic Öhlins suspension. And in that regard, I think they've done an excellent job. Now, with it, you have a standard 3 riding modes that are semi-active. You have a comfort, you have a normal, and then a dynamic. Now, between the three modes, if you don't adjust anything else, they crucially change the handling and just experience of the motorcycle. In comfort, this thing is plush as, a Cadillac, to put an American spin on it. In normal, things get ramped up a little bit, and then in dynamic, which is exclusively associated with track mode, it just tightens the whole chassis up and makes it the pointed machine that it really wants to be. Now, that said, because it is using the Öhlins Smart EC 2.0 system, it does use the objective-based tuning interface, so it doesn't break things down into the common compression and damping nomenclature, using things like braking support, mid-corner support, front end and rear end stiffness, things like that. And this system is also used on the Ducati Panigale, Yamaha R1M, etc., etc. So if you guys are familiar with that, same thing here. That said, the way they've tuned this, I'm incredibly impressed with. And it's just, beautifully well done. Now, for faster riders and those that really just want the classic fixed suspension, so it's not adjusting damping rates as you're riding, you still have three fixed modes and you can work from there. But really, the semi-active suspension really shines on the street, and it just gobbles up pavement and hides a lot of the road abrasion that a super sport would put straight through to the rider. And it makes it an incredibly comfort but balanced ride. So tipping this thing in corners is just super balanced, super easy. And as I said, you have a little bit more feedback on the front end as well compared to the naked bike. So the way it handles is just balanced, tips in, you can get on the gas, use all that umptious low end and mid-range, good to go. And that really sums up what this motorcycle is. You could say it's a bit of a styling exercise, but it's one that I especially like. And we can also say that about bikes like the Thruxton R to a certain capacity. If you want something that's sporty, but not to the point of a superbike, then something like the RR is really going to be right up your alley. So, overall, I've been incredibly impressed with this machine. Of course, the last thing I want to touch on is the Brembo Stylomic calipers and rotors. He's using 320 millimeter rotors up front. And of course, this tasty little Brembo MCS lever, so it's a ratio adjustable and span adjustable. And, brakes are just excellent. Then you also get the really, really competent electronics package with lean angle detecting, traction control, ABS, which is linked front to rear, and it still works really well in a racetrack setting. But, one criticism some people might have is that you don't have the range of adjustability that you would on a common superbike. So wheelie control, traction control, etc., aren't isolated individually. They are tied to your ride modes. Now, I think for this bike overall, because it's not a true superbike, it's not really aiming at that extremely high-end and extremely focused customer. It's a sort of set it and forget it kind of mentality. I think their current strategy of just coupling things together into road, sport, and track settings is a good idea. And on the racetrack, TC was just where I'd want it, giving me enough wheel spin and slip to get around. And it was particularly tricky today because we had mixed conditions, so a lot of dampness out there. But overall, for almost $21,000, this motorcycle, it impressed me quite a bit. Now, if you guys have any questions about the 2022 Triumph Speed Triple 1200 RR, go ahead and drop them down below. And the last thing I want to do is go ahead and remind you guys to be safe out there. Now, take care.